Okay, Wally, whenever you're ready.
Okay, good morning, good Erev Shabbos, everybody. Everybody, most people are accustomed to eating tuna fish out of a can. That's how it comes, or now you have it in packages. Same question, packages or cans. Question is whether there is any kashrus question concerning kosher tuna fish that comes to us already cut up. There's no signs of fins or scales. And do we rely on the presentation or just a hechsher without actually seeing fins and scales on a fish? The same question to a certain extent occurs to sardines, but not as much, but primarily for tuna fish. Fish have to have fins and scales. If there's no hashgacha that the fish is in fact kosher, can we eat the fish? That's question number one. Question number two, does every single fish have to be examined? And furthermore, can we rely on non-Jews to determine if a fish is kosher? Can we also rely on a principle known as rove, statistical majority, probability, that the fish that are caught in the nets are all tuna? There was a big controversy a number of years ago concerning dolphins that are very often caught in the nets with the tuna. You know, are they always thrown out, or are they just thrown into the hopper and processed with the tuna? And the processing of the fish is also a fascinating question. The tuna fish ships that go out, they're often out for weeks at a time. And the fish is processed on board these ships. So the fish are caught, and then they're processed and they're frozen. Ultimately, by the time they come back to port, they're ready to be put into cans. And then, of course, we'll get to the issue how they're cooked in the cans. Well, I'll mention that also, because once the fish is processed, let's assume for argument's sake that the fish is primarily tuna and nothing else is in the nets, and then it's canned and steamed in the can. Are there any questions of bishul akum? We're not allowed to eat food that's cooked by a non-Jew. Where is the supervision at this point? Do we rely on the non-Jewish processing in order to certify that the fish is kosher? A lot of questions about tuna fish. Obviously, the answer is yes, you can eat kosher tuna fish that comes in a can with an OU on it or a star K or what have you. But be aware that many, many years ago, Rav Henkin prohibited the consumption of tuna fish unless there had been a mashgiach involved in the processing from start to finish, which is why at one point, I don't know if they still do it today, but at one point you had a mashgiach on the fishing boat, which meant you had to be out there for a long time. Again, commercial fishing of tuna fish is hard work, but they're out there for weeks at a time. So again, most people think when they go into a store, in terms of meat, for example, that all kosher meat comes already wrapped in plastic and on a little styrofoam plate. But there's a whole process before it gets to the store. The same thing with tuna fish. Tremendous processing takes place. What are the halakhic consequences or requirements to make sure that that package or that can of fish that you get in the supermarket is in fact kosher? And we have the issue of Rav Henkin's psak. Once you have a Gadol Hador who says you can't eat canned tuna fish unless there's been a mashgiach involved in the entire process, once one posek has forbidden something, are you allowed to disregard that particular psak? Again, the contemporary poskim have dealt with this, and the processing at the time that he poskin is no longer prevalent. and therefore the cans are kosher if they're certified kosher. And many contemporary poskim, including Rav Soloveitchik, are much more lenient. Rav Aaron Cutler also. At one time, Bumblebee did not have a hechsher, and he allowed Bumblebee tuna based on the processing where it was done. But tuna fish has fins and scales. We know that. However, you should be aware that there are different types of tuna fish. And at one point, there's bluefin, there's albacore, there's skipjack. And at one point, skipjack was very questionable until ultimately it was decided they brought a skipjack tuna to Soloveitchik and he examined it from head to toe, literally head to tail, I should say. And it was considered kosher after personally checking it. But that's an important question. Does every fish have to be checked before it's processed? I mean, they're hauling in nets with hundreds of fish in it. And a tuna is a very big fish. Each tuna is several hundred pounds. It's a huge, huge fish. Do we have to examine every single fish? Can we rely on the non-Jewish ship workers or factory workers in some cases in terms of determining which fish is a tuna, which is not? Now, normally when they pick up the nets, they throw back, which is obviously all the stuff that's not kosher. But there's an important halakhic concept known as mirtas. Mirtas means that no non-Jewish worker is going to jeopardize his entire business and reputation to do something that will ultimately show, for example, that the fish is not tuna or that he's cutting corners. If he is providing fish for the kosher market, he's going to make sure that what he provides is going to be kosher, because if it should come out that some of the fish were not kosher and they were non-kosher fish mixed in, that would jeopardize his livelihood, and no one is going to do that on purpose. Although, unfortunately, we do find every so often, you will find somebody cutting corners. Unfortunately, it does happen, usually not in large commercial operations, but on small local, a small butcher shop might save money, cut corners by at night, nobody's looking, bringing in non-kosher meat, which has happened a few times. Or somebody in a restaurant might bring in non-kosher products, not the actual food itself, but whatever it might be, cookies or whatever, or not the main ingredient in their produce, just to save a few dollars here or there. Individual small shops occasionally, and that's why you need a mashgiach tamidi or mashgiach, a permanent guy. In some places, a vara kashrus only allows the mashgiach to have the key to the store or the key to the refrigerator to avoid these problems on a local level. But on a mass production level, this rarely happens. Once they have a hashgacha, and it costs them a lot of money to get a hashgacha because you have to kasher and make sure everything is done properly, they're not going to jeopardize that to save a few bucks, because that's their livelihood. So you have mirtas, you have the status of you have rove also. Rove, the statistical probability of rove, and there are differences of opinions on how much percentage has to be included to be considered rove, majority, in terms of the number of fish that are caught or the processing of the fish. I won't get into the lumdus involved there, but clearly these are a lot of halakhic considerations that the average person may not think about when he buys his packet of tuna fish in the store. The Gemara in Avodah Zarah talks about a certain type of fish known as a chilek. It's very similar to other types of fish, and we have to be. And it talks about when you catch fish in a net, what percentage is acceptable with this, because this non-kosher fish is known to swim with the kosher fish. And there is a great discussion among the Mefarshim. Rashi is the most lenient, but he permits consumption of the fish, and he quotes a number of sources for that. There's also the question: what about certain fish? And this is a very technical thing that most people aren't even aware of. There are fish that, when they are small, they have no fins and scales, kosher fish. When they get more mature, they grow fins and scales and they can be eaten. So if you have this immature fish without fins and scales, are you allowed to eat it? That doesn't apply for tuna fish, but it applies sometimes to some of the fish that might be caught with the tuna. And things can sometimes get confused. And that's why you have to have a mashgiach, either on the boat or certainly in a factory when it's processed. The other issue, and this is also a serious issue which has to be dealt with, or is dealt with, and that's the question of bishul akum. The factory cooks the fish, sometimes in the can, most of the time in the can. What is the reason for bishul akum, the prohibition? We don't eat food cooked by Gentiles the same way we don't drink non-Jewish wine, because we're afraid that over food and over wine, there'll be too much socialization and it'll lead to marriage with non-Jews. So the cooking itself is not the issue. The cooking is what it might lead to. Having a meal together, having a drink together. And tuna, number one, is steamed. That's how it's cooked. In the huge factories, very often after it's canned. And in these factories, whether it's in Asia, whether it's in Puerto Rico, where a lot of fish are caught, we're not worried about social interaction with the factory workers many countries away from us. And that is the basis for kind of allowing bishul akum in terms of tuna fish. There's a long discussion about this. For recently, we were very concerned about dolphins, the other fish. That's why, as I said, some mashgichim are actually on the boats, depending on which kashrus agency you're relying on. Tuna is processed and canned by non-Jews, and we rely on their motivation not to lose business, and they want to market the best quality fish, and they're concerned about the economic viability of their business, and therefore the statistical probability of non-kosher fish is determined to be a remote possibility. In fact, in some cases, it's so obscure that it is what the halakha would consider halakhically irrelevant. And the percentage of non-kosher fish, because again, it affects their business. They only want good quality tuna fish from their catch to go into the cans. One of the questions that comes up, which is a big debate between the Orthodox kashrus agency and the conservative movement, concerns swordfish. Whether swordfish have scales at one point or the scales are lost. Is swordfish kosher? Is it not kosher? The Orthodox rabbinate has determined that it is not. There are those who say that there are in the conservative movement that allow swordfish, and that's an ongoing machlokas haposkim right now. We do not eat it. But basically, the tuna fish that you're eating very often has a hashgacha, but there may not be a mashgiach present throughout the entire processing, and we have to rely on rov, we have to rely on mirtas, but there are a number of halakhic considerations that allow us to eat tuna fish today, which is perfectly fine. 60, 70 years ago, it may not have been as easy to give a hechsher because the processing was a little bit different. Factories were different. Processing were different. The way they caught fish were different. Today, you have nets that stretch out for a mile. Imagine a net that covers a mile. Huge, huge nets between ships, and then they haul it all in mechanically, and there are thousands and thousands of fish caught in these nets. And as they haul them on board, they throw out the ones that are not kosher. Is it possible every once in a while a non-kosher fish gets caught in there? Yes. Statistically, however, it becomes irrelevant because there's a very, very small minority. The processing of tuna fish is different than the processing of other fish. And sardines are very similar to tuna in terms of the canning process, but the primary concern of bishul akum doesn't apply, and all the other concerns of rove and fins and scales are all dealt with, so you can enjoy your tuna fish, which is a standby for many people when they're traveling on the road. So it's a good thing that we have that now. But just be aware that in America and elsewhere, it wasn't always that simple. Kashrus today is not a simple matter. You have to be very, very involved in food technology. You have to be knowledgeable not only in the halacha, but you have to be very, very knowledgeable in processing. And every different type of food and every different type of factory is different. And the OU and the other kosher agencies, they have people who are experts in not necessarily in the kosher aspect of the processing, but in the mechanical aspect of the processing. Then the machinery involved and what other additives might be added. You have to know the chemistry. It's not as simple as it once was. You know, in times gone by, you had actual shochtim each week slaughtering for the family. And you went to the shochet and you got your meat and then you butchered it. And then if there was a question, you brought it to the rabbi, or if they had a chicken that wasn't 100% checked it properly, or they found something inside when they examined it. Today, it's all done for you. And we are very, very far removed from the days when you would go into a butcher shop and find a butcher in the back pulling out the veins from the meat, pulling out feathers from the chicken. That's all done commercially, and it's done before it ever gets to the butcher shop. The butcher shops of my youth with the sawdust on the floor, that doesn't exist anymore. Most butchers don't know how to devein a side of beef anymore. It's a lost art. It has to be done by somebody who's knowledgeable, but that's all done in the slaughterhouse under the constant eye of a mashgiach. The same thing is true of deveining the meat, taking out the sinews that are not kosher. To know that is a tremendous art and a skill, which most butchers today simply cut up the meat. That's what they do. They chop it up, they package it. And the real action takes place in a slaughterhouse, which very few people ever see, either a slaughterhouse or a cannery or a ship which brings in the fish. Anyhow, I just wanted to share that with you. So next time you enjoy a tuna fish sandwich or a tuna salad, you can appreciate how it got to your plate.
We'll think of you, Wally.
Any questions?
Yeah, Wally, it's my understanding that there are FDA inspectors on the ships. So they're being watched to make sure that no fish other than tuna are processed.
In some cases, yes. Not always. Not always, because some of these things are done out in foreign countries. And I don't know if the U.S. sends people out to the foreign countries to go on ships, but that certainly happens. And the same thing with mashgichim. Some kashrut agencies actually have mashgichim on the boats. I don't know if there's a minion between the FDA and the mashgichim, but clearly you have to be careful. Again, we just open up the package or open up the can and eat the fish. Until it gets there, a lot of things happen in between, which could affect the kosherous of the fish. But yes, FDA is very, very important, not just for tuna fish, but in all factories. Insect infestation is a big problem, and they have to be very, very careful about that as well. Anything else? Okay.
Thank you,
Have a
Wally.
good Shabbos.
Thank you.
Have a great
Good.
Shabbos.
Have
Thank
a
you,
good
Wally.
Shabbos, everybody.
Have a good
Thank
Shabbos.
you.
I'm gonna eat some tuna now.
Enjoy.
I'm
I
joking.
have sardinas.
Have a great Shabbos. Hi, Yanish.
Yanish.
Good Shabbos. Good Shabbos.